My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Alex Davis. It's June 3rd, 2025. We're at the Tulip Shop Tavern in Portland. Thank you so much to the Tulip Shop for letting us have their space today for the interview. And Alex, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
First question, why wine?
Oof, man. I mean, it's delicious. That's, but wine, wine was always around me. One of the reasons I wanted to do this in a bar is because that's kind of like where my wine career started on multiple fronts. So I grew up in central Maine, in a little town called Winslow. Especially until I was like a young teenager, my dad owned a rather colorful dive bar / motel called the Yardarm Tavern. And he and my mom were like, family dinners were super important, and they were generally drinking wine. My mom only drank my wine. Dad beer too. But yeah, they would let me have little sips, and I was just so that was around all the time. And then, much to my mom's chagrin, I sort of fell into restaurant work as a teenager after having done some more manual labor stuff as a younger teenager, and realized that working in restaurants where there was free food and there were girls and there was music and there was not just me like shoveling shit, that was way better. So that sort of, I worked at like a divey seafood place in high school, and then got a job like managing the dining hall in college. Study abroad stuff just was, dishwashing, doing whatever. But I guess wine started for me for real. I was living in Melbourne, Australia. Had my first like real bartending gig at a wonderful bar I hope to return to someday called the Standard Hotel in Fitzroy in Melbourne. It was really just kind of like an old crusty like shot and beer place, but the owner was super passionate about wine and was a super passionate home cook. And so he effectively, he lived in a tiny place in the city, and so his whole personal wine collection was effectively the bar list. But that was just so he could drink what he wanted while he was hanging at the bar. Like he used to drink like whatever Chardonnay, and he would always order a flat white, like it was like coffee for him. So imagine like gaunt, grumpy Australian Santa. That was kind of Andy's vibe. And so aside from my parents, he was like my real first wine mentor. Like, when he's teaching me how to pour beers and just teaching me the steps of how to be a bartender. He asked me about wine. I was like, I don't know shit. Like I'm, 21-year-old American. But yeah, he kind of took a shining to me and started like teaching me a little bit about it. And I still remember it was a bottle of 2007 Pike's Riesling from Clare Valley, Australia, where it's like, I don't know, just like I think a lot of people have that aha moment to one degree or another. And I was like, oh, like this is goddamn delicious. But beyond that, it's like I love, I've been working in the hospitality industry since I was like 14, and so this is already coming up on a decade in, and I loved it. I love the energy of bars and restaurants, love food. My mom always she's like, not surprised, you always love to eat. And so yeah, it seemed to me like I wanted to stay in hospitality, and as a way to like have more tools to travel and kind of land on my feet anywhere, like wine seemed like a cool thing to quasi-specialize in, rather than like, I'd never worked like craft cocktails were really just kind of bubbling up even in Melbourne at that time. And beer has always been something I like to drink, but never anything I was passionate about. And so, yeah, I got, had to move back from Australia because I was young and dumb and things got weird with visas and ex-girlfriends and all that. So after kind of getting hooked on wine in Melbourne, I moved back to Maine for a short time, and then moved up to Burlington, Vermont. Had some high school friends. They were like, we have a closet you can live in for free. So I moved up to Burlington and got like 3 jobs for a year. My first proper wine job, so like second mentor, was a guy named Brian Maloney, who I think still runs the program at like a fancy grocery store in Burlington called Healthy Living. And he was like, that was the first time I really got to taste like a ton of wine, taste the world of wine. He just wanted somebody to monitor his set on weekends and not screw it up. And in his words, as I recall loosely, he was like, we got to drive all around the state in Vermont to go to these tastings. I just want someone who's like not going to bug me in the car, like someone I can just hang out with. And he was really lovely and really gave me a crack at it let me read all I wanted in the store during hours as long as I wasn't not doing my job, and took me to all these tastings. And that was kind of the first really eye-opening situation for me.
So come back to that in a second. I want to back up a minute. Tell us about, you mentioned managing the dining room while you're in college. So tell us about your choice of college and what you did there.
So I went to Bowdoin College, which is about 45 minutes south of where I grew up. And to be honest, it's a great school. I had an amazing time, on a lot of levels. Amazing education, made lifelong friends. They were really insistent about studying abroad for everybody. And as a kid who'd grown up in central Maine and stayed in the region for school, that was huge, but I wanted out of Maine. I knew I wanted out of Maine by the time I was probably 11, and so going to school just down the road, my mom wanted me to go to Colby College, which was literally 5 minutes from my house, and I was like, that's an awful lot of togetherness. So 45 minutes or an hour made a lot more sense to my teenage brain. But then you're just filling out all the forms of college, what jobs have you had? What job, you got to do something for financial aid. And they were just oh, you've worked in restaurants. We'll just slide you into the dining hall. And then my rapid ascent of going from guy scooping beans to manager was, my first real win in the industry. And it was it was, pretty light lifting, but just a skill set I had. And I've always liked being around people and shooting the shit. And so it was easy.
How did you end up in Australia?
Like I said, the study at Bowdoin was really, really, I think 90+% of students there study abroad. It's a huge push for them. And I don't speak another language, unfortunately. Biggest academic regret. But I basically wanted to get as far away from home as possible and live in a city and somewhere where I could actually understand the courses and all that. So I looked at a few other far-flung destinations, and for whatever reason, Australia just seemed like a great fit. And Melbourne is amazing, still one of my all-time favorite cities. I felt so at home there right away. Honestly, sort of how I felt about Portland when I landed here. They're places that just feel cozy and feel right away, and Melbourne was that for me. So I went to study abroad there for 6 months, fell in love with an Aussie girl, came back heartbroken, figured out I had enough AP credits from high school to skip a whole semester and go back and still graduate on time. So I moved back, got a dishwashing job at this pub, The Standard. And the owner said, you ever come back, I'll make you a bartender. Went back, graduated, and then moved back for a year. And that's, so I was, 22? At that point, and that was that's the year the wine really started to itch me.
You mentioned your second mentor and being the first time you kind of dove into the wider world of wine. Tell me about starting to learn wine, both learning your palate and sort of learning about wine.
Learning my palate took a lot longer, I think. We should all be honest, and it's still ongoing. That's anything else. That's changing all the time, and you learn new things, find new things, get fascinated by new things. But when I moved out there, I had, like I said, I was bartending, I was waiting tables, I was doing all sorts of stuff, and this wine-specific job was really perfect because it was on 8 to 5 on weekends, so I could do that and then go do my night thing. I never want to work like that again. Was working so many jobs to save up enough money to get the hell out of New England. After a couple of years in Australia, Maine, Burlington winter were I'm over it. And that was really the impetus to get out of New England and move to the Northwest. I guess I should back up. The first time I'd heard of Portland, I'm not an idiot, I was aware of the West Coast's existence, but I still remember reading an article in the Melbourne Age, their big weekly paper. This would have been 2007, 6. But my then girlfriend and I thought maybe she loved the US and was maybe we'll do a little back and forth and spend some time in the US, spend some time here, and figuring out where we might land in the US together. There's this big article about basically effectively that Portland was not such a scary place for Aussies and Europeans because it doesn't bludgeon you with Americana. And vibrant music scene, great food, super affordable, at least at that stage. And so that was sort of always on my radar. And then obviously big life changes. But in Burlington, I was crashing with a dear high school friend who was on a course to become a chef. And he wanted to get out of New England too. And so after, 14 or so months in Burlington and working a million jobs, we packed up his Jeep and drove across country.
What year was that?
That would have been 2009. But I didn't land in Portland first. I did through Dad's weird bar connections and like beer distribution channels, I thought I wanted to try my hand at production. Well, I did want to try my hand at production. And wrote letters to, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, wrote letters to wineries in California and Oregon and just had no idea even how to pitch it of yeah, I'm a bartender who likes wine. You want me to come lug some pumps around for you? I didn't know what I was doing. Then my dad got me hooked up with, I'm not going to throw the name in there because it's a winery I don't love these days, but landed at a small family winery in Spokane for a Harvest Crush internship. And none of that was for me. Spokane, not for me. Worst combo of winter and desert summer that I've ever experienced. And the people there were super lovely to me, but quick 6 months in Spokane also dawned on me pretty quickly that production wasn't gonna be for me. That's not the kind of wine I've ended up getting into anyway. That's a different conversation, but basically too many early mornings, too much alone time in a cellar, not enough people time. Part of the reason I loved bartending and I loved this industry from childhood is all the human interaction.
So what came next after Spokane?
So hot 6 months in Spokane, and then we were throwing darts at the map. It's we don't know, we can go to Seattle, we can go to Portland, we can go to the Bay, and basically started looking at rents, and I was we can go to Portland. That's so moved here first week of 2010.
And what were your initial impressions?
How real of a story do you want?
I want the real story.
This is a good one. So through a guy I bartended with for a hot second in Burlington who had moved out here and was running the kitchen at Momo's downtown. We didn't know anything about Portland really. So he set us up with a regular of Momo's, a friend of a friend of a friend with a place to crash. It was you can rent out this room in the basement for $100 a week until you figure out your life. And we pull up with our car packed with shit and our trailer of limited belongings to a house up here in North Portland. And, open the door. This woman opens the door, welcomes us in. And she's let me take you down to, where you guys gonna be crashing. And we go down to the basement and she sort of pops open the side room door and it's just barren concrete basement with a stained sheet in one corner and a little floppy mattress in the other corner. And she was oh man, I haven't been down here since the orgy. And I was fuck, okay, welcome to Portland. And we knew pretty quick, so that was she was lovely to us. She, helped us through a couple hard weeks, but it was, I remember being zipped up in our sleeping bags that first night after going out for a bunch of drinks. Someone's we gotta find a place, right now. But thankfully, with the kind of him being a accomplished line cook and me a bartender, the idea was one of us will be able to find gainful employment right away, and then we'll figure it out. But yeah, so that was the first arc of Portland, and there was a couple weeks there, and then we found a weird pre-furnished kind of 70s Asian porn apartment in Southeast Portland, and that was a hot 6 months, and then found a house up here in North Portland. This neighborhood has always really felt like home. One of the reasons I wanted to do it here, aside from my friends owning this lovely bar now, is this area is where I really got started and found my feet in Portland.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a memorable greeting.
I could imagine, yeah. So tell me about finding your feet here. How did you start to find your way here in Portland?
It's funny. I feel in terms of a young person moving here, looking for the city is kind of inverted in a lot of ways. When I got here in 2010, super cheap, tons of really affordable housing, tons of really affordable eating, drinking options, but still on the heels of the 08 financial crisis, no fucking jobs. Way more brutal than I expected. So my buddy Shane got a job right away in a kitchen, or a couple different kitchens. And it took me, I was down to that like a week with like, am I gonna have to like call my parents and beg for money because I got like $80 left. And I had my first job, was equally as squirrely. No longer exists, but for all the fans of Twilight out there, the Viewpoint Inn in Troutdale, are you familiar with this now disappeared establishment? It's like right under Vista House. She's nodding, yeah. So, yeah, I got a job just like waiting tables at this bizarro wannabe fine dining pre-fee restaurant. The building was gorgeous, like incredible views of the gorge, but really a very strange place. I went from like a server assistant to wine buyer in 2 weeks. It was like, this doesn't seem like a sustainable arc. This feels bad. So I was there for a really, really short time, and the only job I ever quit without notice. And then my real job, I met like being a wine buyer, I guess, like in panic mode. Like I met a couple like lovely wine reps, like Margot Lemma from Lemma Family Wine Company, which she and I are still friends, and a couple of great other people. And so made enough connections that when I bailed there, Margot actually helped me get a job at the place that really launched me, which used to exist down the way at like Killingsworth in Denver. It was called the Hop and Vine. And so Margot was like, you should meet this woman, Yetta. She's young, she's got this like really fun program going on. I think you'd be a great fit. Weaseled my way in there as a bartender, and then in short order, and more reasonable order, convinced her that she was too busy to really run a wine program and she should let me do it. So yeah, became a wine buyer proper, even though the place was more known for like burgers and IPAs, like trying to run a thoughtful, tiny wine program in like summer 2010.
Tell me about that. Tell me about running a wine program. What was important to you about it? What did you learn about it?
I mean, that was my real design moving out here. After realizing production wasn't going to be my thing, I was like, I would love to, I knew my sort of limitation to it. I was like, I want to run like a small neighborhood bar bottle shop program, and like, as a way to further my education, I was still like figuring out what I liked and why things mattered to me. And so just like tasting all the time was still at a really high premium, because I think, I was still reading every book that could get thrown at me and doing all that sort of research, but that can only take you so far. That you can only see so many maps and read so many like, thoughtful pieces on terroir without connecting the dots through actual like sensory perception. And so, Yetta was amazing. She was like a huge part of developing my career and really developing my social network here. Like, it's crazy to me still how, 15 years removed, like how much of my friend group runs through that old place. Like a couple of the guys I still live with worked there with me or were regulars, and like it was super instrumental. And so yeah, she really just kind of was like, she's like, you're not gonna have a lot of money to spend, but I don't really care what you do. Like, figure out good glass pours. She ended up opening a bottle shop next door, which gave me like a much bigger outlet to like buy a more diverse set of wines outside of just like neighborhood glass pours. But yeah, trying to run like a farming focus, I hesitate to use like natural wine program because that's awfully contentious, but yeah, trying to run like a really thoughtful, unique wine program in North Portland in 2010 at a place that was really driven by burgers and IPAs was a fun challenge. But I was still, bartending most of the time. So I feel like for a long time I sort of had like a foot in the beer world, a foot in the cocktail world, a foot in the wine world, but wine was always kind of the focal point for the long range. How did
you get to know the industry here, and what did you find when you went looking for farming focused wines in Oregon in 2010? I would say that sort of like the farming focused thing came into focus rather quickly meeting winemakers here. Like, I met Barnaby and Olga from Teutonic early on, Stephen and Chris from Analemma, Chad from Minimus, and many other things now making wonderful limited edition wines with Brie. And I think, like I said, at this point I was still really figuring out what mattered to me in wine and why I found things delicious. And the focus on like farming first and sort of terroir driven wines came really
exponentially to me. Like I just started noticing in the years I was at the Hop and Vine that it was like anytime something like wherever it was from, whatever style, like anything that really, really grabbed me from a flavor standpoint tended to be biodynamically farmed and kind of like low intervention. And yeah, this is before the whole natural conversation really like bloomed. But for me, it was just like, oh, these wines are like way more alive and way more expressive and way more delicious and like have so much more to say than this here luxury wine or this here grocery store wine or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, that was really, like I said, just being given all the time and all the tools to just like taste and figure out what I liked and why I liked it was an amazing opportunity. I'm so indebted to Yetta for that.
What did you think about the industry at that point? What did you think about the people making the wines?
You know, I loved, like, it was great meeting, like, immediately hit it off with a bunch of my reps and a handful of winemakers who were like, all those people at that point didn't even have distribution. They were all just like popping into neighborhood spots, and I thought it was remarkable that these people who were doing such fascinating, thoughtful, like lifelong kind of missions were spending time with some random 26-year-old wearing like cut-off denim shorts and like teaching me about stuff. But I'll say like it took me a really long time here to feel like I fit perfectly anywhere in the wine world. Like having one foot in beer and having a lot of beer friends, and then like learning about craft cocktails kind of on the fly, but feeling pretty intimidated by the guys who'd been doing it longer and were really into it. Yeah, it didn't take me a long time to find like a group of friends here. I'm a pretty gregarious guy, and like I said, love food, love drink, love spending time with people, but it took me a number of years to feel like I fit in like wine specifically here. And that probably came more into focus when I was working at Nostrana some years later. Yeah, I was at Hop and Vine for about 3 years, and then left. Had always wanted to do some traveling, and so left town for almost a year to do some backpacking, and then spend some time with family. And when I got back, I did a really short stint at trying to get a job as a bartender, and that would have been like February 2013. Was still challenging. Ended up doing a short stint with the old Pasta Works in the old City Market, which was a delightful crash course in cheese education, but didn't pay nearly enough to satisfy me. So I started in Nostrana early summer 2013. And so Kathy Wims and David West, the owners and wonderful couple behind Nostrana, like that was sort of the next step of real like mentors and people who I felt like really gave a shit and really taught me so much specifically about Italian wine and Italian food, but restaurant culture as well, and just like how to run a really successful business with your sort of like heart first in a lot of ways. So they're still good friends of mine. Nostrana still feels like family to me. Like, I sell them wine these days, but I mean, it's like, that feels like one of my real homes in Portland.
So tell us about, before we talk about that, tell us about the year off and what you mentioned you wanted to travel. Tell us about those year adventures.
So when I was living, this goes back to Melbourne a little bit, like growing up in central Maine, not a lot of diversity of food or humans or anything. It's just pretty, meat, potatoes, seafood, white bread kind of community. And so when I was living in Australia, like my mind was just fucking blown. Like I still remember going out to dinner with like kids I was living in this new dorm with, and like 19-year-olds were confidently ordering beverages and they were like using chopsticks. And I remember being at this dinner and I was like, I don't know how the fuck to do this. Like, I'm so embarrassed. I'm such a rube. Like, I need to figure this out right now. Like, I need to accelerate my sort of perspective and international know-how. But living there, like, Melbourne has such a crazy, diverse, and amazing food scene. And I literally had never really had Thai food or Indian food or any of these things. And then moving here, obviously the food scene is great, but I wanted some firsthand knowledge. So I spent like 3 months trekking my way from Singapore up to Hanoi. My dad was mystified, my mom was terrified. Like, they were just like, whatever, like, I don't get it. Like, you're just taking a backpack and you're gonna just wander around? I was like, yeah. So yeah, I had wonderful times in Singapore and in Kuala Lumpur, Penang, a couple of Thai islands, all over Thailand, all over Cambodia, all over Vietnam, and it was one of the best things I've ever done.
Tell us a story from the road.
Ooh, let's see. There was some. I'm trying to think of colorful, but not too colorful. I had made friends with, I was in Kuala Lumpur for, a week or whatever, and had, made friends with this surfer bro guy, and he was equally as confused about my food tourism, because he was just there to, drink and party and meet girls and then go off to far-flung islands and surf. But he was willing. It was like, all right, let's go, we'll start our party evening with whatever weird food you want to eat, and we went to some, one of the amazing, food courts, and you got to be pretty, it's just I don't know, point and shoot, that looks good, I don't know what it is. And I, ordered this thing at a food stall in Kuala Lumpur, and I'm eating it, and I'm like, no scary flavors or anything, but it was I don't know what this is, texturally, this is and so the server eventually comes back, and I was and she spoke a little bit of English. Obviously, don't speak any of the language over there. And I was like, "What is this? What am I eating?" And she was like, "Oh, mouse deer," and just wandered off. And I was like, and I looked it up on my phone, and mouse deer is a Southeast Asia. It's the smallest member of the deer family, so it's a deer the size of a rabbit that I was then eating. That was pretty good.
Could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, could have been a lot. I did. I got a pretty strong constitution, but I did get really waylaid by some freshwater snails in Vietnam, and that was a special experience. But it was great. I still have been yearning to go back to that part of the world, especially Penang in Malaysia. The best food I've eaten on a meal-to-meal basis in my whole life.
Amazing. So coming back, tell me what your plan was, or what your hopes were. You mentioned that wine had always been kind of the focus, even as you were doing all the other things. Wine was the thing that interested you. So tell me about what you were looking for in your sort of next thing back.
To be honest, coming back, I had pretty much blown all my money, and I was crashing with some friends, and I I wanted to get back into something serious, but at first it was I just need a job to be able to pay for my life. And then, at Nostrana, I was lucky enough, I made really good friends with the then wine director, Mike D, who's still a good buddy of mine. And they would I got there, they would have been about coming up on 10 years old. And they were sort of going through a huge shift in how the restaurant worked and trying to grow and trying to change the model a little bit. And they had never had an assistant wine director. They'd never needed one, which was basically just doing putaways. But it allowed me to sit in on tastings still. And then I was there to be part of the nation sommelier team that they still have. And that was cool. I never really worked a floor, being just a wine salesman. So I guess I didn't have a specific arc of I want to be a somm, I want to be a retail buyer. I just wanted more touches on wine, and figured, the more I knew, the more time I spent with good people and good wines, it would lead me somewhere. And I guess that's, to backtrack a little bit, but that's how I found myself with PDX. So to rewind back to Hop and Vine days, my favorite rep, my most knowledgeable rep, and I think really probably my most important mentor in wine specifically, her name's Bonnie Crocker. I don't know that you've interviewed her or not, but you should if she's willing. She moved out here about 5 years before me and worked for a couple companies that no longer exist, but was basically hired at PDX day one, or in the first 6 months. And she's also got some Maine connections, so I think she was warm to me initially because of our geographical connections, and there's not that many Mainers out there, so it's always an interesting meeting in the wild kind of scenario. But she was my rep for Hop and Vine when I was trying to do my thing as an independent buyer, and then she was the rep at Nostrana, and we just always kind of stayed in touch and stayed friends, and I always really, really respected. She's one of the few true experts to me in the rep game, even though, I mean, she's my sales manager now, but you know, I don't consider myself an expert in much of anything. I'm a super passionate proselytizer and salesman, and I love drinking wine because it builds community and it's delicious and it's fun. But she's an amazing fount of knowledge. And yeah, after, you know, I worked at Nostrana for about 3 years. I was honestly just having some like physical problems from having bartended for so long. Like, that industry's a young man's game in so many ways. Like, nothing's ergonomic, hours are weird. Yeah, I was just like struggling in my relationship because the hours were crazy, and yeah, my body was kind of getting more and more pissed off of me, and I was just losing my joy for the customer interaction. It was getting shorter and shorter with people, and so I was kind of like scratching my head about like what would be next. And then she asked me in what it would have been summer of 2016. She was like, I don't even know if this is a real job, but if it was a real job sometime in the next year, like, would you maybe be interested in trying out repping? I was like, all right, sure. Kind of perfect timing, and like I said, I love all the love and respect for Bonnie in the world. So she introduced me to the founders of PDX Wine. First I met Michael Wheeler. We had beers at a dive bar and watched some soccer. And had sort of the good cop meeting.
That sounds right.
And with Blame Wheeler. And then I met Don Heisteman, who gave me the bad cop routine. And then I met with the two of them, and just like, yeah, I've only ever worked for like small family companies, and like I remember my signing meeting with them. You know, we grabbed like coffee at Ken's Bakery over in Northwest, and they spent like 40 minutes trying to, like, arguing with each other about saying the same fucking thing, and I was like, this is perfect. Like, Bonnie works for these guys. This is like Statler and Waldorf. Like, I'm in. And so yeah, I started with PDX February 2017 with the. I believe, as Bonnie put it, she was like, I just want to try. She's wanting to move up more into like portfolio management and get off the street, stop dragging the bag. And she was like, I just want to find somebody who I don't think will fuck up all my hard work. I was like, thank you so much for your vote of confidence. But yeah, that's how I got started. And now, you know, I'm in year 9, which is the longest I've ever had a job by over double. So pretty, and through some major upheaval in our industry. Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey for me and my company, and for Oregon wine, and just for wine at large. Especially the last 5 years have been unique.
Yeah, we're going to talk about all that in a second, but first I'm curious about and you mentioned your initial role at PDX was still sort of being created. So what was the initial role, and how, I guess, what were the things you had to learn? What did you need to know to get started at PDX?
I mean, Bonnie was always sort of the on-prem specialist, like restaurants mostly, bars too. They kind of hired me, coming from that world, speaking that language, being familiar with a lot of like restaurant workers in town. Like, they sort of hired me as an easy fit to take over her route, and then ideally dig deeper into the bar world. Like, try and, you know, my big mission when I started, I was like just trying to convince bars. I was like, look, take your beer, your cocktails, your food so seriously. Why is your wine so fucking shitty? Like, just if you work a little bit harder and spend like $1 more, everything can be on the same plane, and this will be a much more complete program. And so, you know, that really resonated with some people, and will never with others, for personal taste, financial consideration, all sorts of shit. But that was kind of my foray. It was like, here's this pile of restaurants, Bonnie's tended very well. Don't fuck that up. And then please try and find an inroad for our better than average wines in every bar that you can. How
long did it take you to get to know your portfolio?
I mean, there's not a whole lot of. There's none. There's no official formal training in the wine rep world. It's kind of just figure it out. Like, ideally you have a great mentor, and like Wheeler and Bonnie and Don were really, really helpful in like supporting me. But basically the line, and I've told this to newer reps who've come through PDX now, is like, you're really not gonna have any fucking clue what you're doing for at least 2 years. And so I promised myself when I started, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like this. I don't know if I'm going to be any good at it, but I'm going to like do it no matter what for 3 years to give myself a fair chance and see how it goes. And like, yeah, the first few years were really brutal. You know, I think a lot of people who are well connected in the industry who jump to the wholesale side, like, expect their friendships and their connections and ease of communication to pay off, and you treat it a whole lot differently when you're a rep trying to bang down somebody's door as opposed to a bar buddy. And so it was a nice, I think, a useful hit to my confidence, and sort of like, got to take some time and reframe and step back and like assess how you're doing things and why you're doing things. But honestly, like somewhere in year 2, 3, it just sort of clicked. And I remember Don saying something to me early on, even in our his bad cop meeting. I presume you know Don. Okay. He was like, you know, when it's good, it really just feels like driving around town, talking shit and talking wine with your friends. And that's still true now. That's not every day. That's not every month or quarter. But like, when it's good, it's just talking about my favorite things with people who are also enamored with it, and that's so much fun.
So take me through take me through an average week or an average month for you as a rep. What is it? How do you schedule your time? How do you figure out where you need to be when? How do you figure out how to emphasize, what to emphasize, and what to let go? How does it work?
I mean, it changed. You know, it certainly has changed a ton from year 1 to year 9. But I think, you know, in that year, like 2, 3, 4, when it really started to click, the way I've described it to friends outside the industry is like, I feel like the better and better I get at this, or the more comfortable I get and more experience at least, you know, the schedule feels a lot like it did sort of like towards the end of college, when you have a little bit more control over like the set pieces of your schedule. Like, so it's, you know, 2, 3 days of total insanity, running around town, trying to keep everything on the rails, being a restaurant-driven rep, like, I have standing appointments, sure, but a lot of it is like creating my own schedule every day, every week. It's always different depending on the wines, the people, the fucking weather, whatever, traffic. And so I like that challenge. I think, you know, a whole part of this gig is really about like how you create your own systems, rather than like, so, you know, showing up on time, being reliable, having systems that work is just as important as knowing anything about wine. And I like that I like the freedom of it. I like being able to control my own schedule. But these days, it's like, you know, Monday, Friday are sort of build out the week, recap the week, kind of like the edges of it. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are unpredictable. Some days and it all depends on what everybody else in the company's doing. Do we have winemakers in town? Are my top buyers in town tasting, not tasting? So yeah, it's a very, it's a gently frenetic schedule. And I like it. Yeah, I like the sort of create your own adventure aspect of it. At this point, it's very hard for me to imagine showing up in one place and working 40 hours a week. Like, I really like you know, certainly things or at least parlance we've learned in the last few years, the sort of like combo work from home, work remote model, like that works great for me. I love being able to spend a little bit of time like working from home on a Monday if I want to cook all day while I'm working, and then I love bouncing around town and being out in the world and being energized by what's going on in Portland.
How has your role changed as you've gotten more into it? Have you taken on more responsibility? Have you taken on different clients or different areas? I
mean, it's an ever-shifting landscape for sure in the, you know, restaurants, bars, rising and falling all the time. And so my role, you know, it's like the way it was painted to me early on by Wheeler especially was like, you know, in the early days, you just want to blow it up, take on, like, grab every little piece of the pie you can, and so I think my busiest or like my biggest account load after the first handful of years, I had like 160 or 70 accounts, and like that's not really tenable for anybody, like not doing the best service. And so at that point, as we've hired new reps, you know, like sort of give them stuff that's an easy starter base, because, you know, working as a commission employee, it's really scary in those first few years when you don't know if you're going to be able to go out to dinner with your friends or make rent or whatever. So yeah, man, it's it's obviously 2020 interrupted any sort of regular arc for our industry in so many ways. And so it's a hard question to answer. Like right now, I think we're all we have the best team at PDX we've ever had, down to drivers in the warehouse, Bonnie, Wheeler, love my other reps, and so, but we're all kind of figuring it out at the same time. It's not, nothing feels particularly settled or like it's easy to prognosticate on what's going to happen in the next year, 5 years, whatever. That feels, I think, planning best you can and being sort of speedy and reactive to how the situation's changing is where I find myself these days. It feels pretty impossible to think about exactly what's going to be happening in 2030.
Or 24 hours.
Or yeah, exactly. Yeah. The tariff toggle.
Let's talk about 2020 first, as we're talking about interesting things for your work in your industry. You mentioned obviously a big interruption, a huge change. How did 2020 affect you, and how did you sort of get through the year? What did you have to do to adjust?
2020 was really, really brutal for me. Is that I was happy to stay employed. PDX, Wheeler and Don carved out a great way for us all to keep our jobs and keep everybody together. But as I alluded to earlier, the human aspect and the connection and sharing this stuff with people is what really keeps me going and keeps me plugged in with all this. And so doing Zoom meetings with winemakers, dropping off little labeled pill bottles of samples that were probably just destined to go die in someone's fridge because they had all sorts of their own crises going on. 2020 was brutal. I had personal stuff going on too. So yeah, that was a bad year. I think in a couple times I almost freaked out and quit and wanted to just run off to the woods, but I'm very thankful that I did not.
As the pandemic went on and as things started to change, as I guess the reality of it started to kick in, this was a fundamental change. How did your job change, and how did you see the industry starting to change? Being a restaurant-driven rep, it felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me in a pretty serious way. And so I really respect the way we sort of navigated as a team. We decided to kind of just pool our commission because our grocery guy was who had just started. He was hey, I don't know if I necessarily deserve all this. I'm working but he was, he's got kids, and so he was just buried. And so we all kind of shifted our account bases around and just kind of hung together as a team the best we could until the world started reopening and we could. So it was 2 years of share the load together and kind of call on each other accounts and just do whatever to keep everybody afloat and keep the company going. Kudos to Wheeler especially for never relenting on buying wine. I think that was a huge success for us throughout the scary times. It was never short on inventory. Always had stuff to offer even if nobody was really asking for it. And I think that's kind of our philosophy right now too, is that gotta have stuff on hand. The world gets weird in so many ways we can't control, but let's just try and focus on the local right in front of us. We've got so much good shit going on right here. And so yeah, that's kind of been, shrinking the world for myself has been the way to keep positivity going and keep my love for this industry, because yeah, it's awfully easy to get overwhelmed and subsumed by all the bad shit going on. But obviously, I don't know if we're gonna know how all that really changed the industry for another 5-10 years. It's gonna require some deep looks back in time after it. It all feels incredibly volatile and unpredictable and strange in a lot of ways still. Better, of course. Yeah, if I never have to take a big bottle of wine and divvy it up into 12 little plastic bottles again, I will be so fucking grateful. Bad memories. What about some of you mentioned, obviously you alluded to some of the current challenges facing not just wine, not just Oregon wine, but sort of alcohol in general. How has that affected you? How have you seen the last couple of years, and what is your path forward for you?
It's been really hard. It's still hard. I think everyone is like trying to figure out what to do to make an impact. Because between supply chain shit and work culture changing, happy hours changing, like so many things have changed that it's hard to sort of track. And when I explain to my parents or friends outside the industry of like why it's such a challenge right now, it's this kind of impossible to nail down confluence of things, like part the economy, part I think 2020, like a lot of people just forgot how to be people. Supply chain issues, now Trumpito 2.0 and tariffs, like it is a lot to try and digest and figure out. And so like I was saying, for me at least for the last few years and for now, it's kind of just like try and remind myself all the time of like why I love this industry and why I love wine and why I'm so grateful for like the community that I'm a part of and that I've been able to help cultivate. And so hold tight to the bits of joy and the bits of things that I find really fulfilling, and try and quiet a lot of the outside noise. Not bury my head in the sand, I don't think that's effective either, but you know what I mean? Like, there's only so much that any one of us can take on or do or accomplish or react to in any regular span of time that, kind of one foot in front of the other. And I don't expect there to be a light bulb switch of like, oh, the world's back to 2019 again. Like, that's never gonna fucking happen. Like, that's over. But I think there's enough, like, there's enough tradition, there's enough passion, there's enough enthusiasm for all this still that, like, the people who really give a shit are gonna figure out how to make it work. And I'm still figuring that out. Like, I still love it. I don't know what else I would want to do with myself. I don't know where else I would want to be in America. Like, I still love Portland, even though the city's had a really challenging handful of years. But I'm still optimistic.
How does the restaurant scene in Portland seem to be doing now from your kind of estimation?
It's struggling right now. And I think, we still got a lot of great people. I wish there were more places opening. But I get it. Like, the economy's a big challenge, and figuring out I think restaurants specifically, to backpedal a little bit, still haven't recovered from losing so many pros in 2020. Like, a whole swath of the industry, and I can think of a bunch of people I worked with over the years just left, like career servers, career line cooks, like just went into any number of other things. And you can't, you could fill the staff up with bodies, but you can't replace that sort of like learned attitude and learned proficiency in not only knowing wine, but selling wine and selling whatever, like selling specials, selling, the whole program. So I think we're still playing, we're not in like the staffing crisis of 2021 where like restaurants just like couldn't find bodies to fill the roles, but we're still like in the process of like educating and recalibrating a whole segment of the industry that's, each little sort of link in the chain here does its bit, but I think for restaurants and being a restaurant-driven rep, like I feel like bottle sales, like long list wines, more serious wines, more like higher price point wines, like sales are really still kind of like scraping back, and that's again like due to so many factors all at once of like, is it a first-time server who doesn't feel confident recommending this $100 bottle of wine, or do they even know what it is? And then like, did the consumer's 401k just get blown up in half? Like, so it's kind of hard. It's really hard to like pinpoint and track a singular challenge. But I don't know. It feels, maybe it's just the weather that we're having, but it does feel like the last month, Portland's sort of starting to wake up. I feel like the city really tightened up after Election Day, understandably. But I feel like people like are excited for summer, and hopefully we'll loosen up and have some fun.
So I know you've mentioned that this is what you're doing. You can't see yourself doing anything else. But let's look ahead to the future a little bit. What is on your horizon? Anything else you're excited about, personally or professionally, that's coming down the line?
I'm really excited personally, selfishly, that like wine trips for us reps are like slowly starting to come back. Because honestly, like that's one of the biggest draws. There's not a billion perks to being a commission salesman all the time, but like getting to travel the world and meet the people who are responsible for these things, and like really getting a sense of the place that they come from and the food culture and everything behind it. That to me is kind of really what completes my love for what I do. And obviously there's been I got to go to the Loire Valley with Louis Dresner selections in 2019. So that year was like, year 3 of me repping. That was hugely informative on so many levels, and really like emotionally and philosophically fulfilling. And then we have this big gap staying at home and figuring it out. But last summer I got to go to the Canary Islands with David Bowler Imports. I meet a bunch of amazing winemakers in Tenerife and Gran Canaria and Lanzarote, and like, those little moments, even if it's just 4 or 5 days, I feel like can kind of sustain my appetite and intellectual curiosity and passion for this for some years. So I've had the good fortune to travel on my own and visit some other wine regions, but more of that for work and for play. Like getting back and seeing more of the world is really paramount to me.
And I know we've already established that prognosticating the future for wine is a fool's errand right now, but
super hard. Tell
me about the next few years, how you hope. What do you hope to see in the world of wine in general, Oregon wine specifically, come out of the next couple of years?
I still think Oregon wine is in a super exciting place overall. And that's another one of the things that keeps me hopeful for the larger industry. I think Oregon wine is still so undefined. Of course, everybody knows Oregon Pinot, and beyond that, are we in the moment known for Enoch Chardonnay or for Skin Contact Gris, or for what the second category kind of pales in comparison in terms of international renown. But I look at what's happening in the Gorge as a fully untapped, unmapped, who knows, we're not tied to centuries of tradition. We don't have all these rules and regulations on what can be done. If you told me 10, 12 years ago that I would be loving Merlot from the Dalles or Sangiovese from Underwood Mountain, I would have laughed. And that feels like a real, there's so much cool work being done out there by Analema and Cutter Cascadia and Buena Notte and lots of others who I'm forgetting to name right now. So yeah, I think what Chad Stock and Breesock have talked about over the years, we need more diversity, and we can do it here. It's we don't have it all settled. We have more than enough Pinot Noir. So I'm really excited to see how Oregon can kind of define itself in this, I don't know what you want to call it, third wave chapter, fourth wave now maybe. Yeah, because there's so much potential here. And even with hotter, more erratic vintages, we're still a fascinating terroir and cool climate, and yeah, the scope of what we can make here is pretty astounding to me. Sometimes when I'm just putting together samples and sending out emails, and I'm like, holy fuck, look, there's I've got a bag of 10 wines that's 15 different varieties, all from Oregon planted. And so yeah, the potential for more diversity on all scales, and more unique and delicious shit, I think is really, really exciting still.
How has your palate changed as you have been here longer?
Oh, I think like I said, when I moved here, I was still really figuring out what I liked, and I think a lot of us gravitate towards sort of bigger, juicy, more primary, more easy to digest and understand wines early on. So early in my wine career, I loved Rhone wines a lot, and I think part of it was the price point too. There's a lot of great value in the Rhone, so when you're a broke 20-something, that's a really appealing category. I will forever have a soft spot for Australian wine in my heart, even though we don't see much of the good stuff over here. But I would say, my time in Nostrana was really, really important in my palate development. That's the most serious wine training I've ever really received. The rest of it is kind of self-taught or learning through friends and mentors. But that was I really respect what Kathy and David have put together, and now Austin carrying it on of having really serious wine meetings and diving deep on a producer or a region. And so I would say I definitely have more of an Italianate palate these days. Like, I like a little edge and bitterness in a lot of my wines, but changing all the time. And for me, like, wine is when I'm drinking wine. You know, I spend all week tasting wine, talking about wine. So at the end of my busy sales days, like, I oftentimes just want a delicious lager or a Fernet or a daiquiri, or like, I don't go home after like 10 hours of selling wine and like immediately pour myself a big glass of anything. Like, wine for me is so food related, and I love to cook. That's, you know, cooking and hosting people and gathering to dine on whatever is my biggest hobby and my bigger passion than wine. And so whenever I want to cook or have like a really serious meal out, like, that's when wine comes into my life more as a consumer. And so I'm super open. Most of them. I mean, there's a few things I just generally don't love, which makes all my friends very upset at wine, or my wine friends, that like, Pinot is just not my thing. I'm happy to drink some more than others. Like, there's some Oregon Pinot, there's some Burgundy that's really lit me up, but that's pretty few and far between. And yeah, I drink a lot more white wine and rosé and skin contact wine than I do classic sturdy red. But it really depends. Really depends on what I'm eating.
Give me an example of a favorite thing to make and a pairing with it.
Ooh, that's a very good question. I mean, just this week, you know, like an easy, can impress friends or can just like satisfy me in an hour if I'm feeling kind of lazy at home. Marcella Hazan's tomato butter sauce number 3, which is an Nostrana staple. That is one of the most perfect, quick recipes in existence. And, you know, if with like a little cheese and a little tomato, you can have effectively almost any wine with it. So I think the other night when I made it, I drank a half bottle of a weird anomalous field blend of whites from Tenerife, and then a half bottle of like a really cool new Valdeaustin red that we just got in stock.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
But thankfully, you know, I've surrounded like I said, I've really found a wonderful wine-specific community here over the years, but still most of my old school friends and the people I see more often are chefs and bartenders and stuff like that. So we all do a lot of cooking and hanging, and, you know, a mixture of high lowbrow. There'll be some Fernet, there'll be some shitty yellow beers, there'll be some great wines and magnums. It's like, that's the, like, you know, if every day could be like Thanksgiving.
Oh, I love that. All right, all the questions I have for you. Anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't cover today that you were hoping to cover?
No, I feel like you got a good sense of me and a good sense of my wine arc. I want everybody to go out and have more fun and drink some more delicious wine. Like, I think that's, maybe it's frivolous, but I think that's a huge way forward that people have lost track of, is that, like, I don't think we're valuing fun and the most fun you can have is like sharing delicious shit with good people you care about and sharing conversations. Like, yeah, we've lost track of that a little bit too much in the last few years, and life's been stressful, so I get it. But yeah, I would implore everybody to open a good bottle with some friends and have some food and have a good fucking time.
I think of no better way to end it than that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Your time.
Appreciate y'all reaching out.
And thank you again to the Tulip Shop Tavern for hosting us here today.
Thanks, Devin. Thanks, Tyler.
And giving us
Everybody come have some burgers.
Wonderful background energy to this interview, which we don't usually get. So thanks for sharing with us. We'll go ahead and let you off the hook.